So revolutionary affects really fueled a kind of relentless pace of activism as the ISA endeavored to win Americans over to their cause, right? They wanted to expose the Shah and convince Americans to pressure the US government to withdraw all of the economic, military, and political support to the Iranian regime. So ISA members expressed their anger towards US policy in Iran and their desires for revolution in many different ways. And I'm going to show some examples. They carried out hunger strikes. So this is a leaflet from the Washington, D.C. chapter of the ISA. And you can see here, this is a picture of students, sitting in and carrying out a hunger strike in order to protest the torture of political prisoners in Iran and call attention to that. And they're wearing these very crude cardboard masks because with the permission of the US government, SAVAK agents were operating in the US, spying on students, taking their pictures, keeping tabs on them, and threatening their families back home. So ISA members started wearing these masks to try to protect their identities and those of their family members. ISA members occupied consulates, embassies, buildings, and one time they even occupied the crown of the Statue of Liberty. This is the front page of Resistance, which was the English language publication of the ISA. So you can see they really wanted to make their struggle legible to Americans. They had an entire publication in English. And you can see here they did like a banner drop. They actually had two banners. One says "Down with the Shah," and the other one that you can't read very well says "Free the 18," which was a reference to 18 political prisoners who were going to trial in Iran. So they did these kind of spectacular events to try to get media attention and, expose the contradictions of the greatest democracy in the world, supporting a regime that was torturing dissidents, right? They protested that, so the Shah would come every year, pretty much every year. He would go to the White House, whether it was a Democrat or Republican, it didn't matter. And the ISA, of course, would always show up and protest those visits. They would also protest the numerous honorary degrees the Shah was awarded by many, many, many universities, American universities. And, the theme was usually about political prisoners. So here's an example of a flyer, one of many kind of very, very typical of the style of a lot of their propaganda was to try to cut through the glitz and the glamour, the way that the Shah and the Queen were represented in the US media was as these sort of enlightened monarchs, very glamorous celebrities, this sort of fascination with royalty. And, the ISA was trying to cut through that, right? And say behind this shiny veneer is torture, is execution, is brutality, right? That's what this is really about. So I kept finding evidence of Iranian anti-Shah student activists in also some very unlikely places. So these were some of the ISA protests around the Shah that I just shared with you. But I also found evidence of Iranians participating in many other movements. For example, the San Francisco State Strike in 1968-69, which was a historic, really epic movement that really brought into being new forms of coalitional organizing. The Thorough Liberation Front and the Black Student Union led this strike, and they really made connections between the different kinds of oppression that Black people had faced, that Chicanos faced, Indigenous people faced, Asian immigrants faced, and they were really trying to make connections with different kinds of racism, different kinds of oppression, and they struck to demand all kinds of changes to the curriculum, the faculty, the student body, to really try to turn it into an anti-racist institution. And these were not demands that the ISA or Iranian students shared at all. They were not immigrants, they were not minority Americans, right? They were just on their student visas, supposed to get their degrees and go back home. And yet, several of them really threw themselves into the struggle. This is an image from one of the mass mobilizations during the strike, and I drew a circle around ISA member Khosrow Kalantari, who was a San Francisco State student at the time, an ISA member, a very important ISA member, a leader, and he was, very involved. He was one of the recognized student leaders. This is of the strike. This is a satirical leaflet put out by the strike committee, and you can see Khosrow's name is listed among the top student leaders who were wanted for crimes against the state. It's a sort of a pun on the state in terms of the government, but also San Francisco State, and this kind of recognition that he was among the most supposedly threatening, student leaders helping to lead the strike.